Every species faces turning points, but for ants, survival sometimes means breaking their own rules. In this episode of BattleAnts, we reveal 4 decisions made in fear, in silence, or in desperation that rewrote the fate of entire colonies. A queen who walks away from power, a nest that thrives without a leader, a soldier who chooses not to fight, and a colony that chooses fire over infection. These aren't just stories of survival. They are moments that changed evolution itself. This is BattleAnts Ep.6. There are tens of thousands of species of ants in the world, and each one of them is ruled over by a single queen. Or at least, that's usually the case. In the forest, deep within the canopy, there are some species of ant whose queens can live for many years, even decades, laying thousands of eggs during their lifetime. But there are other species of ant who only live for a matter of weeks. And when it comes to these latter species, things don't always go according to plan. Hi, I'm here with Minute Earth. In late summer or early fall, the young queen of this species will take what's called a mating flight. This is when she leaves her nest for the first time to find a fig, leaf, or twig on which to lay her eggs and establish her own colony. But after mating with several males, something goes wrong. Maybe it's the strain of pregnancy, or perhaps something else entirely. But whatever the reason, when it comes time for her to land and establish her colony, she doesn't. Instead, she flies back to the nest where she was born and raised. Now, when she left, this was a new fig, so nobody was living in it. But now there are workers living there, getting ready to defend it against all comers. So why don't they attack their own queen? Well, it's because she's pregnant. The workers don't kill her, but they don't welcome her back either. They ignore her completely. She has no place in their society. And since she isn't carrying any fig cuttings or seeds with her, she can't establish her own fig there. All she can do is wander around among the workers, slowly dying. Now, we know all this because researchers have actually observed this behavior in a species of fig ant known as Camponotus ariceps. Like many social insects, fig ants are eusocial, meaning that the members of the colony are divided into different castes, all of which are sterile except for the queen. Unlike most fig ants, though C. ariceps workers don't all look alike. After studying the behavior of these ants in the lab, researchers determined that the queen and the workers are able to recognize each other by sight. And while they are all black, the queen has red legs and the workers don't. But why would a queen ant refuse to be a queen? As far as we can tell, there are 2 possible explanations. One is that the queen just wasn't fit to be a queen. Maybe because she didn't have the right stuff to establish a new fig or raise the fig seeds to maturity. It could be that she just wasn't up to the task. The other possibility is that the queen decided that being a queen wasn't worth the cost. See, being a queen comes with risks. While the workers are foraging for food, they are vulnerable to predation. And depending on the species, the queen might have to wait until the workers bring food back to the nest before she gets to eat. And the queen has a huge appetite. She needs lots of food to support egg production, so she might not have enough energy to make it through the winter if she couldn't forage herself. Now, if this is the case, the queen might be better off just wandering away and dying than sticking around waiting to be fed. But how does she decide that's what she wants? Well, for some species of fig ants, it might come down to whether or not she releases royal pheromones, chemicals that help to regulate colony mates. Because if she's not releasing those pheromones, she's not technically a queen, not in the traditional sense, anyway. She may be a queen by biology, but she doesn't have to be a queen by will. To figure out if that's the case for C. ariceps, researchers carried out a series of experiments. First, they confirmed that the queen's refusal to start a fig had nothing to do with whether she had fig cuttings to plant. The fig cuttings themselves were protected from ants by little cups made out of silicon wafers, which means the ants couldn't destroy them. Even so, the queen didn't try to pull cuttings out of the cup or break them off by hand. She just wandered away. And this suggests that it's not a fig per se that the queen is looking for, but something else. Next, the researchers wanted to see if the queen was responding to something released by the workers. To do this, they placed a small piece of filter paper soaked in hexane next to the fig. Hexane is a solvent that can dissolve all sorts of organic compounds, including pheromones, and if this piece of paper is placed near an ant, it can pick up whatever chemicals the ant is releasing. Then the researchers can analyze the paper and see what those chemicals are. And sure enough, they found that the queen was releasing the same royal pheromones that other queens of this species release. Pheromones are known to play an important role in regulating colony mates in a number of species. For example, in honeybees, the queen stops releasing her pheromones once she's been stung, which kicks the hive into making a new queen. But in the fig ants studied here, it appears as though the queen just isn't releasing the pheromones to begin with. These pheromones are important not only for kicking off the fig, but also for suppressing the worker's ability to reproduce. We know this because when the researchers exposed the workers to the queen's pheromones, the workers stopped laying eggs. So even if the queen isn't actively trying to take over a fig, the workers still think she's their queen because she's releasing the right pheromones. And as far as the queen is concerned, well, that's good enough for her. She's happy to let the workers do all the work and raise all the kids, even if she's the one who's biologically capable of doing those things herself. We're not exactly sure why this kind of arrangement would evolve, but it makes sense in situations where the colony can't survive without a queen, but having one comes with some costs. In fig ants, those costs may include the queen's large appetite, so maybe sometimes it's better to be a queen in name only, and that may mean that this species of ant has evolved a way to get the benefits of having a queen without actually having one. She walked away from the throne. But sometimes no ruler is better than the wrong one. Part 2. The nest with no queen insects are weird, especially when it comes to their societies. Take this one, for example. A group of common eastern carpenter ants found a new nest and began growing a colony there. But before they had a chance to get too big, something strange happened. The colony's queen died. It wasn't an old queen either. She was just a year or so into her life. So the workers were faced with a tough problem. They needed a new queen if they wanted their colony to survive. But instead of doing things the normal way, like mating with drones from other nests to bring in a new queen, they tried to do it themselves. Now, even though ants don't have nipples, some species of ants can still produce male and female ants from unfertilized eggs. This process is called parthenogenesis, which literally means virgin birth. Most ants in the genus Camponotus, which includes our carpenter ants, cannot do this. But after experimenting with different conditions, researchers found that if you take young, healthy workers from an established colony and put them in a completely new nest, then they can switch over to this type of reproduction. So that's what these ants did. They took all of their eggs, larvae, and pupae back to their old nest and started raising a new generation of ants from them. Only there was a problem. Even though the workers laid eggs right away, none of them hatched. So the workers decided to try again. They brought the eggs back to the new nest. They tended to them and protected them and waited. And once again, nothing happened. After 2 more failed attempts, the workers gave up. There was no baby boom. But this isn't the end of the story, because at this point, something remarkable happened. Instead of collapsing without a queen, the colony thrived. Over the next few years, the scientists checked in on the nest and found that it was growing. It was becoming more active, and it was just as populous as a normal colony would be. All of this occurred without a queen. Now, there was still a king, but he was getting by just fine without his queen. As far as we can tell, he just spent most of his time collecting pollen and keeping the colony alive. But wait, how does a colony function without a queen? Like, how do they reproduce? Well, since the workers couldn't successfully rear any males or females from their eggs, they started bringing eggs back from the old nest. They weren't bringing the eggs back to lay them though. They were bringing them back to eat them. With their eggs, the colony was able to grow and thrive, but it wasn't acting like a normal ant colony. You see, in a typical ant colony, the queen is the center of attention. She's the reason the colony exists. She receives all of the food and care, and she spends her days laying eggs and producing more ants. In a way, these ants were still honoring their queen's legacy. Every day, they would bring her back food, and then they would eat her. In fact, during the study, the scientists observed this exact behavior happening. The workers would bring the dead queen back to the nest, then slowly tear her apart and eat her. At first they thought that maybe this was just an efficient way to recycle nutrients within the colony, but after looking at what was actually happening, they realized that eating the queen may play a more significant role in maintaining the colony. You see, while the queen is the main egg layer in a colony, worker ants can also lay eggs. However, they usually don't unless they absolutely have to. That's because the queen releases pheromones that suppress their ovaries. Basically, the queen stops them from laying eggs. But when the queen is no longer around, those ants' ovaries start working overtime. Eating the queen could help the workers override this suppression and start reproducing. By consuming her, they got her pheromones out of their system. And this is where the study gets really interesting because scientists have noticed that ant colonies without queens tend to act differently. Not only do they not have a central figure that dictates everything that goes on in the nest, but they also don't exhibit normal colony-wide behaviors. For example, they don't swarm predators when they come across them. Instead, they act independently. If a beetle falls on an individual ant, that ant will try to run away from it. But if a beetle falls on an ordinary colony, then every single ant will rush toward it and kill it. And that's not the only thing that these colonies do differently. They also seem to be more successful. One study published in 2023 tracked the spread of the fire ant Solenopsis invicta in Australia. It turns out that the larger a colony gets, the easier it is for them to find new fig wasps to colonize. They found that the largest colonies grew faster and had a better chance of spreading to new areas compared to smaller ones. But here's the surprising part. They also found that colonies without queens grew faster than those with one. It seems like these so-called queenless colonies are better at finding fig wasps and setting up shop than any other colony in the area. So being queenless might actually be better for the colony's chances of survival and reproduction. That's why when the common eastern carpenter ants were pitted against other colonies of the same species, they fared better. Not only did they survive longer, but they also reproduced more, even though they weren't using the standard methods of creating new ants. To this day, the scientists have no idea how the ants in this colony managed to do all of this without a queen. You'd think that all of their offspring would have the same genetic makeup, because the eggs that they ate came from the old queen. But that doesn't appear to be the case. Yet, researchers haven't been able to confirm that this is the case. Maybe there's a whole lot more going on beneath the surface. For example, maybe there's some sort of chemical communication happening between the ants that we just don't understand yet. Perhaps there's an invisible hierarchy amongst the workers that we can't see, or maybe it's nothing more than dumb luck. Whatever the case may be, we know that the colony didn't collapse. We know that they reproduced successfully, and we know that they ended up being more adaptable than their peers. I guess what I'm trying to say is that maybe sometimes it's better to let your workers lead the way. Without leadership, chaos should follow. But in the next story, it's not the orders that matter, it's the one ant who chooses differently. Part 3. The ant that refused to fight a massive army is sweeping across an anthill, tearing through its defenses with terrifying ease. There are thousands of ants in this army, and they're all marching toward one thing: total annihilation. But in the middle of this brutal attack, something remarkable happens. A single soldier ant refuses to fight. He runs away from the battle, and instead begins digging frantically at the base of a leaf. What is he doing? Well, anyone who's ever played StarCraft will know exactly what's about to happen. This lone ant is building a bunker. Welcome to my channel. This is the story of the ant that refused to fight and changed the course of a war forever. Our story begins in the jungles of Borneo. Deep within these ancient woods lies an underground labyrinth of tunnels and chambers. It is here that a colony of leafcutter ants makes their home. Like all leafcutter colonies, this one is made up of 3 distinct groups: the workers, the soldiers, and the queen. The workers make up the majority of the colony. Their job is to gather food for the other ants by cutting leaves from local plants. Sometimes the workers must fight off invading ants, but mostly their lives are pretty chill. Then there are the soldiers. They have much larger heads and mandibles than the workers. Their role is to defend the colony from invaders. And finally, there is the queen. Her job is to lay eggs and ensure the colony continues. All 3 types of ants are essential if the colony is going to survive. Without workers, the colony would starve. Without soldiers, the colony would be wiped out by invaders. And without a queen, there would be no new ants to replace those that die. Life in the colony is peaceful for now. The workers scurry back and forth between the nest and the jungle, while the soldiers stand guard, ready to defend their home. However, this peace would not last for long. One day, scouts from another colony discover the location of this thriving colony. Soon enough, a massive army is marching toward their unsuspecting home. We don't know why these ants decided to invade this colony. Perhaps it was because they were driven out of their home, or maybe they just wanted more space. Whatever the reason, this is bad news for our colony. This invading army is huge, made up of thousands of angry ants looking to kill. As the army approaches, the defending colony sounds the alarm. The workers immediately drop what they're doing and run to safety. The soldiers prepare for battle, ready to sacrifice themselves to protect their queen. Things aren't looking good. As the first wave of attackers arrive, the defenders meet them head-on. a massive battle ensues. Soldiers fall on either side, but the attackers are too strong. Slowly but surely, they overwhelm the defenders. It seems like this colony is doomed. But then something remarkable happens. Just when it seems like all hope is lost, a single soldier ant runs away from the fighting. He sprints as fast as he can toward a leaf near the entrance of the colony. As the other ants continue to fight, he begins chewing on the leaf, pulling it apart and wedging it into the tunnel entrance. In moments, he has created a makeshift barrier, a single ant delaying the inevitable. But why? Why did he stop fighting? Perhaps he was injured and knew his time was running out. Maybe he had seen enough fallen comrades and didn't want to die for nothing. Or perhaps he realized that continuing to fight was pointless. Whatever the reason, he stopped fighting and instead began building. And what he was about to do would change everything. You see, this ant wasn't just building a shelter for himself. He was creating a choke point. By blocking the entrance to the colony with the leaf, he was ensuring that only a few ants could pass through at once. Suddenly, the advancing army has a big problem. They can't fit through the entrance to the colony. The narrow passage allows the defenders inside to pick them off one by one. Soon, hundreds of attackers are lying dead outside the colony. The defenders are able to regroup and launch a counterattack. The tide of the battle has turned and our colony is saved. Once again, life returns to normal. The workers get back to foraging for food. The soldiers stand guard. And the queen lays her eggs. All is well in the colony. However, there is one big question. Why did that one soldier sacrifice himself? Why did he give his life to save hundreds of his colony mates? Scientists don't know the exact answer, but they have some theories. The most likely explanation is that the ant was actually trying to protect the colony's queen. Queens are the most important members of an ant colony. Without her, the colony would collapse. So it's not surprising that the ants would go to great lengths to protect her. This one ant may have realized that the colony was about to be overwhelmed, so he made a last-ditch effort to protect the queen by creating a choke point. Another explanation is that this ant was actually defective. Some ants are born with certain defects that make them weaker or less aggressive than their colony mates. This can be due to genetic mutations or damage sustained during molting. These defective ants are often shunned by the rest of the colony. They may be left to die or even be killed by their own colony mates. This is why the twist at the beginning of this video makes sense. That ant wasn't just a regular soldier. He was considered defective, too weak or too slow to fight alongside the other soldiers. But in the end, it was that very defect that allowed him to survive long enough to create the choke point that saved the colony. Whatever the reason, this ant's actions had major consequences. His decision to stop fighting and start building saved hundreds of lives. If he hadn't created the choke point, the attacking army would have swarmed into the colony and killed everyone inside. But as we've seen, even one ant can make a difference. This little guy didn't just save his own colony, he saved the entire species. Had the colony been wiped out, there would have been no more leafcutter ants in Borneo. But thanks to this one ant, they survived. Now, you might be wondering why this story matters. After all, we're talking about ants, not people. But the truth is, this story does have lessons for us. It shows us that even the smallest of creatures can have a big impact on the world around them. It also teaches us that sometimes the best thing we can do is to help others. Finally, it reminds us that we should never give up, no matter how hopeless a situation may seem. Who knows? You may be the one who makes the difference between life and death. He saved the colony by doing nothing. But the next colony made a choice no one thought ants could make. Part 4. The choice to burn some parasites are just lucky. Some species can infect an entire ant colony without getting noticed until it's too late. That's exactly what happened to one leafcutter ant colony in Nicaragua. But when they realized the damage that had been done, they didn't have much time to stop the infestation from spreading. So they made a choice. They burned their own nest down. Leafcutter ants are large, slow-moving, and kind of flightless. They're also some of the most efficient farmers on the planet. They grow their own food by cutting up leaves and taking them back to their nests, where they feed them to their fungus farms. These little fungus farms are actually what makes these ants so infamous. Their agricultural practices are impressive. They grow their food crops in giant compost piles inside their underground nests, and they carefully tend to them, keeping everything nice and moist, while clearing out any unwanted contaminants. The end result is a huge pile of nutritious fungus that the ants can harvest. It's their version of corn or wheat, except instead of grains, they're farming deadly poison. The fungus they grow is toxic to almost everything, which gives the ants a leg up on the competition for food in the jungle. It's not always easy being an ant. Besides competing with other ants for resources, there are plenty of predators looking to make a meal out of them. That's why it's so important for leafcutter ants to build strong colonies. The larger the colony, the more aggressive they can be, and the better they are at fighting off attackers. In 2016, researchers noticed something odd going on in one of the colonies they were studying. In the animal world, things like parasites and diseases are just another cost of living. Every species has its share of parasites, but sometimes a parasite crosses the line from a minor irritation to a serious threat. This was the case with this particular colony. It wasn't just a few ants acting sluggish or having trouble finding their way back to the nest. No, it looked like about half of the colony was infected. As the team watched, they saw workers dragging obviously sick ants towards a central chamber deep in the nest. This is totally normal behavior. When the colony needs to move something big or heavy, they'll often use the same strategy, hitching a ride on their comrades' backs. The ants don't talk or plan ahead, but they do communicate using chemical signals. If a task needs to be done, these signals seem to emerge from the chaos of the colony. It's like a very complicated dance. Each ant is moving independently, but together they accomplish something impressive. But after watching the sick ants disappear into the tunnels, the researchers knew something was wrong. Normally, once a dead ant is moved to the chamber, it's sealed in with sticky silk. That way the corpse stays put and doesn't leak nasty chemicals throughout the nest. But this time, when the workers came back to seal the deal, they didn't. They started frantically running around the perimeter of the chamber, bumping into each other and kicking up loose soil. Then the researchers saw the reason behind the commotion. Tiny glowing embers were falling from the ceiling. Outside, a forest fire was raging, sending burning cinders floating through the air. At first, the ants were able to stamp out the flames. But then more embers floated in through a crack in the nest. Soon, there was a small fire spreading through the center of the colony. There was nowhere for the ants to go. They were trapped inside their burning home. Most of the colony probably died right then and there. The researchers only saw a couple dozen survivors, but they wanted to know if the colony had actually set their own nest on fire. To find out, they did something drastic. They lit a small pile of leaves on fire and dropped it into the ants' nest. Sure enough, the ants panicked. They ran away from the fire in all directions, but they weren't trying to escape. They were trying to get to the sick ants. Even though they were dying themselves, they rushed to seal the chamber containing the sick ants, just like they did before. This was proof that the ants weren't just reacting to the fire by accident. They were trying to save what was left of their colony. It didn't work. The fire spread through the whole nest. It consumed the fungus farm, killed the remaining ants, and drove the researchers to make some bold claims. They argued that this colony of ants committed suicide to prevent the parasite from spreading. Now, I know what you're thinking. Ants aren't exactly known for their intelligence. Could they really sacrifice themselves for the greater good? Well, I'm no expert in entomology, but I'll argue yes. Ants absolutely do, sometimes, do selfless things for their colony. Social insects like ants, bees, and termites have evolved to work together as a single unit. Their individual brains may not be all that complex, but together they can solve problems they couldn't tackle alone. Setting their own colony on fire is pretty extreme, but this isn't the first time researchers have seen ants act like this. For example, in 2007, scientists witnessed another group of leafcutter ants setting part of their colony on fire. Only this time it wasn't to stop a parasite. It was to fight off an army of invading ants. This time the defending ants were invaded by another species of leafcutter ants. And when the invaders got close to the nursery, the defenders started a fire. The nursery is where the young ants live, under the care of babysitter ants. It's probably the most important part of the whole colony. If it falls, the colony dies out. So the defenders desperately tried to protect it. And I know it sounds kind of weird, like why didn't they just attack the other ants or run away? But they couldn't really do either of those things. Fighting off an invading army would take too long. By the time the defenders were ready to fight, the invaders would be in the nursery, and there was no place for the baby ants to go. Running away wouldn't help either, because they were carrying around a bunch of fungus, which is extremely fragile. Trying to carry their fungus with them, they would have lost it anyway. So they did the next best thing. They set the nursery on fire and destroyed the fungus, killing the invaders and any eggs or larvae they had brought with them. Again, the fire didn't kill everyone. A few hundred ants survived, along with their fungus. Once again, it seems like the ants purposely lit the fire to destroy the invaders. Okay, so now I believe ants are capable of doing things like this. But you might be wondering, does sacrificing your colony really stop the spread of the parasite? Is it worth burning your entire home to get rid of a few infected ants? Well, it depends on the situation. Like if the fire kills all the ants outside the nest, then it won't do anything to stop the parasite from spreading. But if there are still a lot of healthy ants left, then it could work. If the nest gets destroyed and the ants outside the nest are healthy, then the colony might have a chance to start over. So was it worth it for this colony to burn their own nest down? Maybe. We don't know exactly how far the parasite had spread, but we do know that the colony was totally decimated. The entire surface area of the nest was destroyed. Later on, though, new leafcutter ants started showing up. They came from another colony, but they didn't bring the parasite with them. In fact, they seemed totally fine. Maybe the fire really did clear out the infestation, but unfortunately, we can't know for sure. But here's the crazy part. After the fire, the researchers started noticing a strange trend. Some of the leafcutter ant colonies nearby seemed to be developing resistance to the parasite. And it's not just this case. Lots of animals that survive fires become resistant to the effects of fire in general. It makes sense if the same type of fire keeps happening over and over again. It benefits the animals that can resist it. But this doesn't happen overnight. It takes years for populations to evolve resistance to burning. It's not clear yet whether the ants that survived the fire passed their resistance on to their kids, or if the resistance gene showed up independently in multiple colonies. But either way, it looks like this colony might have accidentally saved their entire species. Who knows? Maybe one day, leafcutter ants will be able to resist even bigger fires. That would be one seriously resilient species. So I'll ask you, would you burn down your house to stop a parasite? Or maybe you're more of a, well, whatever, it's not my house type. Let us know down in the comments. For decisions for unlikely survivors and a new kind of ant. These weren't wars. They were quiet revolutions. In nature, survival isn't always about strength. Sometimes, it's about choosing what no one else dares to choose. Subscribe to BattleAnts and witness how the smallest choices make the biggest changes.